Start recording. All right, well, thank you to our online gathering this afternoon, Strengthening Prairie Food Systems Together. My name is Marla Carlson, and I am the coordinator at the Prairie Food System Vision Network. And we'll get this right yet. So I'll just start by providing a bit of a roadmap for this afternoon session. So we're going to start off with a short update from me. Then we're going to move on to hear from Colleen Pierce and Norma Bruins. Both participated in our pilot pilot solutions hub that we held in Lac La Biche at the end of 2023. Then we're going to move on and hear from two of our Microgrants recipients, Marie Campeau, the Executive Director at Muskowekwan Family Healing and Wellness Center, and Valerie Zink at the Treaty Land Sharing Network. Then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A and some reflections, and then next steps and how you can get involved or continue to be involved with the Prairie Food System Vision Network. And maybe before I get into our first slide, I just wanted to share a little bit of my experience yesterday at the second annual Indigenous Farm and Food Festival that was held at the Dumont Lodge near Biche, Saskatchewan yesterday. I had an amazing experience in the Ancestral Food Village with Glenda Abbott, who was facilitating those sessions. And one of the things that it really reminded me, well, lots of things, but one was just, the importance of being outside, which sounds a little odd, but it was just a beautiful Saskatchewan prairie fall day with blue skies and sunshine and just a little bit of a breeze rustling the leaves on the trees, and sitting there learning about Indigenous food sovereignty, in particular, the importance of squash the importance of squash and geese and all kinds of different prairie foods. And one of the things that we all committed to when we left was to share something that we'd learned. And there were a couple of things that I learned, and so I thought I would take this opportunity to share them with folks. And the first one was on the plains. First Nations they have the 7 sisters, not 3 sisters. And I've always heard about 3 sisters for almost as long as I've known about gardening. But the 7 sisters are corn, beans, squash, tobacco, Jerusalem artichoke. Ooh, I have to check my Jerusalem artichoke. And the sunflower. And the 7th is me, or the people, because in order for the plants to grow, you need a person to plant the seed. So I wanted to share that. And just, I think for me too, was just remembering the importance of storytelling, and how storytelling is just a key way of sharing information that's remembered, unlike when we sit down and learn a bunch of facts. We'll maybe remember some, but it's the story that helps us connect all those facts together and helps us to, I think, integrate and learn how to share those in our everyday lives, in our work. So I just wanted to honor a commitment that I made yesterday at that festival. So thank you for indulging me for just a moment. And now we'll move on to the presentation itself. Starting with the origin and vision. And many of you have been on these calls before, have heard this before, but I think reiterating or regrounding myself and others in sort of why we're here is a really important way to start the session. The first being that we were a Rockefeller Foundation Food System Vision Prize winner. The project that we entered into the competition was called Koyasistasuan Wokotwin, Making Things Right by Recognize Everyone and Everything is Related. And our vision for 2050 is that the treaty peoples of the Prairie region have reconciled their relationships, restored the land, and established healthy, equitable, and sustainable food systems. And yesterday was also the first time that we had a booth at a trade show. And so I had lots of opportunity to talk with people about our vision and mission. And it's quite big and the length of time is long. So trying to figure out that wording that encapsulated, I feel like I had an opportunity to try that out yesterday. And what I started or where I got to by the end of the day is that what all of this means, at least for me, is that every person living in the prairies is fed culturally appropriate, nutrient-dense food grown, gathered, hunted, and fished on the prairies in ways that respects the land, water, and sky. So there's the big overview of our origin and vision. And then how are we doing that, I guess, is the series of next slides. And the first is our Solutions Hub, or the idea of our Solutions Hub. And the idea is to foster innovation and create cross-community connections, creating spaces for community-led problem solving. Our first Solutions Hub was piloted in Biche, Alberta, and we have Colleen and Norma here to tell us a little bit about their experiences. So I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but just to say that as a result of that process, where folks got together over a couple of sessions to identify their challenges and opportunities. They came up with 4 projects to fund. One was some work that was being done at the Stone Soup Food Center, a new program to them, Land as Teacher, Indigenous Land-Based Learning, Learning with Food Together, and a tamale startup. And we also have microgrants. That's really our other sort of, I guess, string to our bow. And it's community-driven funding to build trust and long-term impact. The microgrants were kicked off with a very generous anonymous donation for $100,000. We wanted to guide our work by what's called trust-based philanthropy, meaning we wanted to reduce barriers for applicants, not only in the application process, but in the reporting process. So in that first tranche, we funded 11 projects. 8 were First Nations projects and 3 were settler-led organizations. We followed those up. We had some other funding from the Rockefeller Foundations to host or to run our Solutions Hub program. And so in the spirit of relationship, we wanted to work with the organizations that we had funded through the Food Systems Microgrants program with what we were calling Game Changer Microgrants to help support them sustain their projects on beyond that first bit of funding for us from us. So the funds were to support planning and consultation and some small equipment to support the projects that they were continuing to do. We also replenished our microgrants fund this year. So not quite as much as the first round, but $50,000 are available. And we've made 3 grants so far this year to the Young Agrarians, the Treaty Land Sharing Network, and to the 2nd Annual Farm and Food Festival. And then, we're always talking about, we want to show impact and are we on the right track and are we funding the right things? And I don't know, I just decided I wanted to do an old school word cloud. And I put in all of the sort of the descriptions of the projects from the applications from the people who had received funding. And this is what it produced. And it made me feel really good that we were on the right track. So the biggest and the thing talked about the most was community, and not surprisingly, community food gardens, systems, elders, land, education, youth, together, sovereignty, transformation, traditional planting, ecological. So for me, it was just a small indication that we were definitely funding the projects and organizations that are working towards our mission or that are a part of that realization of a transformed food systems across the Prairie provinces. We've hosted a series of food sovereignty conversations last summer. We had 110 participants, and this came out of really a kickoff meeting for a regional solutions hub that we are working towards. And what we wanted to start to do was to talk about our 6 areas of action. And we held 5 seminars or 5 online gatherings to do that. So environmental transformation, diet transformation, environmental, cultural, and technology transformation. We didn't quite get to policy because that is our most complex and wide-ranging um, area. And yeah, trying to identify a speaker to sort of encapsulate that was beyond us at that moment, but we're working on it. Then there's awareness and engagement. Our visibility is growing, and storytelling and our digital presence, we feel are key to our influence. Our website, we've expanded. We now have an events page and a resources page, and we have a 2-pager information leaflet that's available that helps to encapsulate the work that we're doing. And part of the purpose of the events page is to showcases many events across the Prairie provinces that are, related to our mission and vision. So if you're on the call and you ever have any events that you'd like us to feature there, I'm scanning all of the time to add things, but if you have something you'd particularly like me to make sure I get up there, please send me an email. Then we're also on social media, Instagram, a mighty 279 followers. But we are getting over 2,000 monthly views. And the one thing that I am doing with Instagram is I'm sharing lots of stories from other organizations, again, to try and show the number of organizations and events and projects that are happening across the prairies that support our vision and mission. And we're also on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then our mapping project. And again, this has been on our website since we relaunched it, I guess about 18 months ago. And we've had over 7,000 views for the map, which when I first saw the number, I was pretty surprised. And it's obviously something that people are attracted to. And one of the things for me, or the importance of this mapping project is that I really think that each of these projects are stars in a constellation. And so what this map is working towards doing is starting to map the stars, I guess, so that we can all see each other and hopefully find ways of collaborating and connecting with each other. And again, if you would like your project or a project that you'd like to add to the map, just let me know and we'll get those added to the map. And then last but not least, organizational growth. So strong governance and structure to support our program delivery and the sustainability of the organization. So we've hired a part-time coordinator, which is me. We've drafted some bylaws. Our federal incorporation is underway, and we're also seeking a CRA charitable registration. And last but definitely not least, our board of directors. We recruited new board members this summer, and we've added five new board members, and really wanted to, many are on this call and wanted to thank them for joining us in moving our vision and mission forward. And then the last always slide, the stay in touch. If you ever want to reach out and have a conversation about what you're doing or find out more about what we're doing, please send me an email, and you can also follow us on the social media on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So I think I'm almost on time for the time that I had allotted for myself. So I'm not going to take any questions on until we're finished all of the presentations, and then we'll have that 10 or 15 minutes together to reflect. But if you have questions, and if you're like me, you don't want to forget them by the time it's the Q&A, please just drop them in the chat, and we'll check that out as well. So next up is Colleen Pierce, the Executive Director at Community Learning in Biche. Colleen was an excellent partner in this process. It was a pilot process, so it's the figuring out as we go along. So I really want to welcome you here today, Colleen, and thank you for all that you've done for your community and the local Solutions Hub process in Lac La Biche. And Colleen and I are going to have a conversation about her experience and how things are going now. So we'll just kick it off with you introducing yourself, Colleen.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Colleen Pierce, and I'm the Executive Director with Community Learning. And Community Learning is an interesting organization because we're interested in changing lives through learning in connected communities. And so there's sort of 5 different divisions, and Stone Soup or food literacy is one of the 5 divisions. And so we're always working at improving and connecting people and having an inclusive place to belong and to help people to become sufficient, that they're not dependent on others. Like, we're always building everyone up to move them along the path.
Great. And do you want to talk a little bit about the partnership with the Prairie Food System Vision Network and how it's impacted, or if it's impacted your work? Yeah.
Well, when I started thinking about this, and initially we applied for, it must have been a microgrant or some type of funding. And it was when we were working with Dr. Frank Robinson from the University of Alberta, and he was big on poultry and hens. And I thought hens and chickens, because they're, kind of small, that that could be something that people could care for. But then, fortunately, that grant was declined. And in hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to us, because chickens, there's a lot of issues. But anyway, then we applied for the next grant, and some of these, I forget the names of them, Marla, but anyway, we applied. And it was that you sent Peter and out to help survey or assess what was needed within the area we served. And that was a great experience, because the first part of that was going around and introducing Peter to all the people and all the organizations. And so what that allowed me to do was to also reconnect with a lot of people that I hadn't been working with. And so that was an unanticipated benefit. And so then at different points in time, we had gatherings and obtained input. And that was excellent, because it was the grounds up. And Norma's on here too. And that was one of the things that stands out in my mind at that session, when they didn't realize that Norma was the health inspector, and they thought that the health inspector was their enemy. And then I said, and so that relationship is like, Norma's fantastic in, community relations. And again, they realized that Norma's here to help. And that was tremendous. And then ongoing through all of this at different points in time, I've been totally working with volunteers and trying to run this totally on my own. And Marla was so patient in, waiting for responses, and much more patient than many other organizations for final reports and whatever. And so then the relationship that we've developed, that Marla always gives ideas. And I know that Marla's wanting to actually have a professional videographer come out and capture this, because we're really bad at even getting pictures of anything because we're always running around doing the next thing. So anyway, that's so it's been tremendous working, and the ongoing relationships we've developed is fantastic.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks for that, Colleen. Can you share with us maybe some of the food system challenges you hear most from your community members?
Well, I guess because we live in a rural area, and we do have a county bus, but it will not go to the Métis settlements and the First Nations. And so for some folks, it really is hard to get to the food bank or us, because and we've tried to alleviate this in all kinds of ways, like people pick up and take to neighbors and whatever, but transportation is a big barrier. And then when you're a food rescue, you're getting food that's donated. And so you never know what you're getting, and it's either feast or famine. And sometimes you're wondering, what on earth are people going to do with this? But, you know, they usually figure some way out to use it. And so there is often, but sometimes there's food that's appropriate for diabetics, because people donate fresh produce, and so that's okay at certain times of the year. And then there's all the special diets, like gluten-free and those ones. Sometimes, there are things that are appropriate, sometimes not. And then Lac La Biche has become a very diverse cultural community with a lot of different religious beliefs. And so, trying to meet the needs of people that don't eat certain foods that are culturally appropriate has, been, a challenge, because sometimes we have things and sometimes we don't.
Yeah, and I was just thinking maybe just tell people a little bit about stone soup.
Oh, well, Stone Soup um, started, we've always tried to work with other partners. So um, we went to St. Paul and did just right before COVID. And because my big concern in life at that point in time was the amount of food that was going to the landfills and filling up the landfills. And I thought, well, how ridiculous is this, when the food could be used to feed human beings or animals, or composted, and not just going to the landfill. And so right before COVID, um, we actually had applied for a lot of grants, and then we actually got one, but we didn't have a home. And so we tried everywhere and finally Portage College offered us a little space, and we started, and we learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. And I, honest to goodness, don't know at that time if we were working with Alberta Health Services. We must have been, but I forgot who. It might have been a different one than Norma. I don't know. I forget that part. But then we moved to another. Portage College needed their space, so then we had to vacate there. And so at one point in time, we were running this food rescue out of a little wee tiny office. It was ridiculous. And so then that's when the board, we were able to scrape together enough money to secure the space we're in. And then, it was all slight renovations. And but every slight renovation had to be, we kept running out of money, or the volunteers would, like, because we were dependent on trade people showing volunteers and to do the work. So we were always, but anyway, we came along, and so Stone Soup is entirely run by volunteers. There is no paid people that do anything. It's volunteers. And so the food is collected from the grocery stores or the restaurants, and it's brought here to Stone Soup and stored. And then from 1 till 4 every day, weekdays, folks, whether you're rich or poor or young or old, or there's no, it's inclusive. You can come and pick up what there is for that day. And, some days we're overwhelmed with the stack of bread we have. And some days we're saying, carrying is sharing. So, um, stone soup. And so that's kind of stone soup in a nutshell, I guess.
For sure. And maybe just tell us a little bit about your community kitchen. Or the,
Well, we have worked long and hard. We a while back we got the little kitchen approved, Norma, and then we got the wrong size of dishwasher and we had to send it back and whatever. But now we have our dishwasher and we have it working. So we're going to have the grand, like a reopening on October 16th. And I was warned by our board, Norma Burns is very busy. Have you got her booked for an inspection? I said, I'll get right on that. I will. So anyway, that's, and I guess with the whole thing of Stone Soup, it is connecting with other people. And so we also get, we give food to the element shelter and help them out when they're short. And the Lakeland Animal Shelter gives us dog food and cat food and other food to redistribute to people with pets. And so, and I guess on that note, I thought that, and I thought it was all about the food, all about getting the food out of the landfill, the food. And then I realized after I watched the volunteers in the back, and I realized that this is really, Stone Soup provides a really inclusive spot where people get together. And even if there's animosity between the newcomers and some of our Canadian folk think they should be sent home, when they actually get to know the people and work with the people, they become that, some of our Indigenous elders work with, back and forth. It's, from different cultures, different age groups, and they really get to appreciate each other and start helping. And so some folks have learned English back there. They help, the young ones help the other ones with technology and devices. Then they find out, oh, gee, you need you're having trouble with filling out a form. So they send them on to this side. And so it's a place to visit and connect and belong. And so then when I go back there and I see people sharing that they have cancer or some other major thing, and here they're all together, providing community, you realize it's far more than the food. The food brings them there, but it's far more than the food that happens back there.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I think that's a really great spot to end on because food is community. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for partnering with us, and yeah, we're looking forward to continuing the relationship. So thank you so much.
Great.
And yeah, Norma, over to you. Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Mentioned, my name is Norma Bruins. I am a public health inspector here in Biche. I have been here for 3 years, and prior to that, I was in Fort McMurray for 6 years. I am a generalist, which means that I cover all the program areas, although about 70 to 75% of my role does involve food in some manner. And I do a variety of inspections. This would be approval for new facilities. We do routine monitoring inspections, demand complaint inspections, all kinds of different things. And my priority is in education, although I do have the ability to do enforcement if needed. And that can, again, take a variety of forms, things like throwing out food or even closing a place, although thankfully that does not happen very often. So it's an interesting job, and as Colleen mentioned, fast-paced. And I don't know if you want me to just continue.
Yeah, please. Yeah, just okay. Go. Yeah.
So I became involved with the local solutions hub on an invite from Colleen. She let me know that there was going to be this session happening. and I was still fairly new to the community. And one of my goals with being in a smaller community was to be more involved with the community. And I also thought, well, if there's a project starting up, I don't want to go in at the end and say all the stuff has to be changed. I wanted to be involved from the beginning so that I could provide direction at that point. I know with a volunteer organization, there are limited resources, so better to use those resources effectively and efficiently. So I wasn't sure really what to expect, but it ended up being a very positive experience and created a lot of new connections and relationships, which I'm very grateful for. There are a lot of resource challenges in this area, as Colleen mentioned, right? Waiting for tradespeople. I know I've had restaurants, if the dishwasher breaks down, for example, often they have to source someone from outside the community, whereas in a larger center, they can call someone and have them there within the hour. So that's definitely a challenge here. And there's a cost to that as well, right? Which can provide some barriers. I think again, creating the relationships and having the collaboration has been a really positive aspect. It's definitely branched off in different ways. Colleen and Stone Soup and Community Learning have hosted a couple of food safety courses that I have taught, for example. Colleen was one of my people that attended, which was great. And so that's been another way where we've been able to break down barriers, because if I put on the course myself, the cost is $125 per person. But if it's put on by a community organization, it's only $75 a person. And so that way more people are able to attend. And then more people become aware of what community learning is as well. This was my first experience working with a community organization in this manner. And it was also my first exposure to a food rescue. I'd worked with food banks before, but not a food rescue. And it really showed me the importance of community building and community involvement, right? This is where we live. We live in a rural area where we need to be more self-sufficient. And I think just moving forward with the world as it is today, we have climate change to worry about, right? Pandemics can disrupt supply chains, and having a sustainable local food system is really, really important. And I know I want to be involved with that however I can. So.
That's excellent. So how or has this work changed the way you think about public health and local food systems?
Again, a lot of the facilities I inspect are restaurants. They're profit-based, right? And this was my first time working with an organization that's more community-focused and wants to support the community. And again, I think rather than just going in at the end and seeing that end result, I think it shifted me to think, okay, we need to start earlier, right? We need to be involved from the ground up. And unfortunately, again, like I'm the only inspector for the Lac-La-Biche area, right? So we have a lot of competing demands on our time. But this experience has just shown me the importance of community collaboration, and that even though it does take time, it's a valuable investment, right?
No, that's great. And maybe do you just want to talk a little bit about the wild game project?
Sure, I can mention that.
Yeah.
So for the past 3 years, I've been working on a Master of Public Health, and my practicum project to end that off was on looking at wild game. So currently in Alberta and probably most provinces across Canada, wild game is very restricted on where it can be served, right? And in Alberta, we only allow wild game to be served at community organization functions and in certain social care facilities. So that would include like shelters or soup kitchens, that kind of place. But we've been having a lot of requests for wild game, and that can include at events other than community organization functions. It includes, for example, people staying in long-term care, at the hospital, in daycares, right? So my project was to look at okay, what are other jurisdictions doing? And can we increase wild game service safely? And what legislative change might need to happen for that? So with that, because of the experience with working with Marla and Prairie Food Vision Network, I had reached out to her as a resource, and that led to other collaborations with Renee and some others. So, and I also spoke to Colleen about this as well. And so yeah, I did up a report. It's now with our management team, and it will be moving up to Alberta Health for consideration for policy and possibly legislative change if everything goes well, to hopefully allow some increased wild game service in certain circumstances.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Yeah, and really, I mean, the reason obviously we wanted to share, what came out of the Lac La Biche uh, pilot local solutions hub, but and also just that, I guess for me, listening to you both just reminds me of, again, it all goes back to relationship and community and building networks and being able to continue relationships and connect to other networks that we may have. And on the wild game project, if we want to call it that in particular, following on from a meeting that was convened by Renee at the John Humphreys Center in Edmonton, because they're doing incredible work on food security and food sovereignty out of Edmonton, but across the Prairie provinces. It just really shows how those, how things can build and how we can share information. And so our next step at Prairie Food System Vision is to continue working with Norma and JHC to see how we can spread this across, how we can be working and understanding how, the state of play, I guess, against the three, across the three Prairie provinces, and how we can maybe help to make changes that will make wild game more accessible in more venues. And I just saw that there was a question in the chat, but we'll save that for the reflection session just a little bit later on. So again, thank you both for both Colleen and Norma, for your participation in the hub, the Solutions Hub, and also your continued interest in the work of the Prairie Food System Vision Network, and for being here today to share what you've been, or what you've been learning, and the ongoing work that you're doing. So thank you so much. All right, I see some questions coming in the chat, which is really great. Looking forward to getting to those in a bit. But now we're going to move to the next item on the program, which is Community in Action, Food Systems Grants. And our first speaker is going to be Marie Campeau. She's the Executive Director at Muskowekwan Family Healing and Wellness Center. So thank you so much, Marie, for being here today with us. All right. You're on mute, just so you know.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Oh, wonderful. I can hear you. Thank you.
I'm trying to press all these buttons.
No,
to show my face also. So I apologize for that. I'm having to use my phone because we had some emergencies at work that I have to take care of and do things. So I wasn't able to be in the office. So I do apologize for that. So I did try to get some people to, well, as Colleen said, it's really hard when you're running a nonprofit organization and you have limited funding and you have limited people. So it's basically you do everything and anything. So that's where I'm at. But so hello, everybody. I'm sorry I can't put my camera on, but at least I'm unmuted. That's a great thing. As Marla said, I am the executive director of the Muskowekwan Family Healing and Wellness Center. We are a nonprofit, non-funded treatment center for families. So we are in our third year of operations, which is really good. We're right on the Muskowekwan First Nation. We're a 17-bed facility, but that depends on the size of a family. So if we have a mother and 3 children, they may take up 1 room, or we may have a mom and dad and 3 children, they'll take up 2 rooms. So it just depends on the size of family. Right now, we have currently 6 adults in our facility, and more often than not, the children are in care, and so they have to take treatment in order to see their children. So on the weekend, for example, last weekend, we had 20 children come in for the weekend visiting their parents. So all of a sudden, we had 26 people we had to provide food for. Food sovereignty has always been at the background of my life experience. And I say this because I worked for a former First Nation, and there was a big winter storm at the beginning of March in 2018, and we got 3.5 feet of snow. That literally closed in the community, not only the community, but the surrounding towns. And what I saw was we weren't prepared for 72 hours of food. We weren't prepared for where we were going to get our food, because what happened in the surrounding community is the people in the towns got first pick at everything. And by the time the community got to the town, there was hardly anything left on the shelves. So that's basically where I've always been driven about harvesting, making sure that we have enough food, looking at the wild game as an option. And many of you, if you're in nonprofits, the food has increased at phenomenal rates this year. It's just crazy how much things cost, right? And you don't get a budget increase, right? So whatever you have, you have to be creative in terms of making it stretch. So I think it was the first year with Prairie Vision that we got a grant there for a garden, and I think we had a 40 by 40 foot garden, and we planted carrots and onions and potatoes and lettuce, and we got some fruit trees, and we built a compost, we got a fence, and that was really the beginning of our harvesting our own foods. And in the fall, it was wonderful. We were able to bring people in to show us how to can and how to do to sustain those foods, how to freeze them, and how to make them last over the winter months. And then what's wonderful is we use the land base as part of a therapy for our residents who come to our facility. But I was thinking about this. We have groups that help plant and do the weeding over the summer, and then we have another group, because we just started a new intake at the beginning of September, who get to harvest and who get to do the canning and sustaining of our food. So that's really great. So but that's basically it. Our facility, we do look right now, it's elk season. So we're hoping one of our hunters gets an elk by the end of September there, so that we can get that processed at the meat shops, and we can use that to help sustain us. So that's, yeah, it's been a wonderful experience, as well as being community based, having the outreach in the community, sharing with other groups some of their harvest. They'll say, hey, do you need more potatoes, or hey, do you need you know raspberries? Yes, we'll take them and we'll freeze them and we'll use them when we can. So we need to work together, and we need to have partnerships, and we do need to collaborate on how we can do self-sustaining for food. And And what we find with our residents who come in, they're mainly box. They buy everything out of a box, right? We just hired a new cook, and I was looking at the list, and it said scalloped potatoes, and I said, scalloped potatoes out of a box, and everybody almost had a bird at the table. Oh no, we're gonna make our own scalloped potatoes. We have potatoes, onions, all we need is some cream, you know. So it was really great to know that the staff are finally getting it, that we're not going to turn to what's on the shelf, but we're going to make it and we're going to create it ourselves. So yeah, I think that's about it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I guess, for again, the through line through all of this is, food, like food is so central to community. And when we get disconnected from food and how we grow it, that there's other disconnections happen in our lives and communities. And when you start to bring that back in, those, things shift again. And I think that's a really beautiful example that you've shared with us, and maybe put you on the spot maybe just a little bit. But if you had one message, or if for people working towards food sovereignty, what would it be? Or if you had that magic wand, I always like that question, that one thing that you could, or more that you could change to improve food security and food sovereignty in your community, what would that be? Or
You
support?
know, I'm very big on land-based therapy. And when you get out on the land or when you're out in the bush, if we take our residents to pick berries and that, it's such a healing process. And I think, the world that we live in right now, it's so technology based. Everybody's got phones, they've got this, and they get away from, being outdoors. And I think that part of you could take them and bring them out to that area. Sorry, my phone's bugging me. I'll try to silence it. um, if you just show them the benefits of what it does. And we just started tree therapy, and one of the individuals shared a story with me about how she had never been introduced to tree therapy. And I often tell our mental health therapists, I did all my healing out in the land in with those trees. But she was telling me, she said, I told the tree, listen, I've raked up all these leaves. I'm very tired. If you're going to drop your leaves, can you drop them over there so I don't have to rake them up? And she said, she was so surprised, because as she was walking away, it was like the tree patted her shoulder and said, okay, I thought, wow. And that is somebody who's gone through the whole process. So if we could have that connection with the land and understand that, the land is there to help us heal, the land is there to feed us, and we just need to have that connection. So I think if I could tell everybody that it's so important when we do the gardening, when we do our own planting, how important it is to have that. So
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's a wonderful way to end your session. I was at the Indigenous Farm and Food Festival yesterday near Batoche, at Dumont Lodge, and I'm almost embarrassed to say that I was outside for 3.5 hours, learning about Indigenous food sovereignty, and that's the longest I've been outside in a stretch, and I'm embarrassed to say how long, and how that impacted me was incredible, and that was just 3.5 hours. So, it's amazing that, when you do take a moment and just be in nature, yeah,
yeah.
it's incredibly healing. So, yeah,
Yes,
beautiful.
I call it green therapy. So, and it just rejuvenates you.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Marie, for being here and for the work that you're doing. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much.
All right. And over to you, Valerie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Zink, and I'm with the Treaty Launcher Network. I'm originally from Treaty 7. I grew up on a dairy farm west of Calgary, and I currently live in Treaty 4 in Regina. As someone who grew up on a farm that neighbors the Tsuut'ina Nation, and was very much aware of Indigenous presence on our farm before my family's history there, and particularly a buffalo jump across the river from our farm that we spent a lot of time at as kids. I've always been interested in the role of agriculture in colonialism and what land justice and treaty implementation and Indigenous sovereignty mean for farmers and food growers in the prairies. I'm one of the founders of the Treaty Land Sharing Network. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, we work to restore Indigenous access to agricultural land and other privately held land across Treaty 4 and Treaty 6. To a great extent, it came about as a response to specific circumstances in Saskatchewan. We have almost a quarter of all of the private property in Canada here, even though Saskatchewan's only 6% of the landmass. South of the tree line, it's 85% privately held, and for the most part off limits to Indigenous people for hunting and harvesting and other land-based practices. So more than anywhere else in the country, farmers and ranchers here have an immense amount of influence over land management and land use, and the ability of Indigenous people to rely on traditional diets and local food systems. So our aim is really to shift the dominant culture around private property and to normalize Indigenous access to land throughout their territories so that it's not just confined to reserve land and crown land and criminalized everywhere else, like we're seeing with the no trespassing legislation in Saskatchewan. Our work is rooted in the understanding that these territories were never ceded or surrendered in treaty negotiations. It was always about an intention to share that land for mutual benefit. And we invite landholders to post signs welcoming Indigenous land users as a visual counter to the no trespassing signs that have really proliferated, and to be part of a network of land that can be accessed for picking medicines, for harvesting berries, for hunting and fishing, and for ceremonial purposes. This spring, we received a microgrant from the Prairie Food System Vision Network for operational costs to support a few long-term projects that we had been working on. The first was creating new mapping tools of all of the land that's in the network. When we first launched in 2021, we had 6 locations in Saskatchewan, and we've grown over the last 4 years to over 60 locations in Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 in Saskatchewan. And last year we expanded to the Alberta side of Treaty 6 as well. So we'd really outgrown the functionality of the website that we created when we first launched. And we'd also learned a lot over that time period about what information land users need in determining which parcel has what they're looking for, and also what they need to be able to navigate there safely and confidently and not end up in the wrong driveway, confronted by a neighbor who's not expecting them and being in a dangerous situation that way. We also wanted to create a wall map as an outreach tool that could be displayed in First Nations offices and tribal councils, urban Indigenous organizations, so that people coming through these spaces know that the network exists and can get a sense of what land is available for them to access. So with the support of the Prairie Food System Vision Network, we completed both of those mapping projects in June. And I'm going to share my screen here to take you for a little spin of our new interactive web map, which I'm really excited about. Just bear with me here for a second. Okay, oops, sorry, just a moment. Okay, does that look good?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not an expert at this.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you.
There we go. Okay, so if you go to our homepage here and go to the Access Land page, we just ask that people self-identify as an Indigenous land user and agree to the protocols, which are just to notify landholders before your visit so that there's open communication there. Access is by foot only unless otherwise agreed upon. Close any gates that you open, and fires aren't permitted unless otherwise agreed upon. And that takes you to our map here. So each of these pins represents a location in the network, and it functions a lot like Google Maps, you know, as far as panning or zooming in or zooming out. You can also filter locations here for specific land uses. So for example, if you're looking for somewhere for berry picking, you can toggle that filter and it just shows you the locations that have berries in the network. You can also change your base map here to get a satellite image, which is helpful, you know, for hunting, for example, if you're looking to see which areas you know, are connected to swaths of continuous habitat or prairie. And you can also switch to navigation just to get a better view of grid roads and that kind of thing. I'll just go back here just a sec. And so if you click on any of these pins, you get information about that particular location. So photos, the name and contact information for the landholder, number of acres, legal land description, and a brief description of what you can find there. And you can click here to open that directly in Google Maps if you're on your phone on the road to see how to get there, and also to see where you are in relation to the boundaries of that parcel so that you're not inadvertently going on a neighbor's land or something like that. And I'm also going to show you our a PDF of our wall map here. So if I go like this, can everyone see that okay? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So these might be hard to see the details here, but these are printed 4 feet by 3 feet for display purposes. And if you zoom in here, you can see individual farms and ranches, other locations in the network. Sorry, my computer is struggling here to keep up. So you can see the landholder's name, contact information. We have these little icons representing the main land uses, like native plants, berries, trees and brush, hunting. There's some for heritage sites if there are known heritage sites there. And these little squares represent quarter sections. So you can see, you know, if the land is all contiguous rather, often it's not. And you can just get a sense of the lay of the landscape there. The last thing I want to share with you is some photos of an event that we held in May. Just a moment here, I'll go. So this was a feast that we held at Box H Farm near Gladmar. And sorry, just give me one moment here to get this organized. Does that look okay? There we go.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this was one of the other major undertakings that we were able to complete with the support of the Prairie Food System Vision Network. For the last couple of years, we've been working on formalizing a governance structure to ensure that Indigenous knowledge and protocols are guiding the work of the network. And we have put together an Indigenous advisory circle of elders and knowledge keepers and other land users throughout Treaty 4 and Treaty 6. And when we met with them in the fall, they felt it was important to have a pipe ceremony and feast to begin the work of the network. So we held this at a member's farm in the spring of this year. On the left here is Knowledge Keeper Shirley, who's on our coordinating committee, and also part of the Indigenous Advisory Circle. And she led all of the cooking for everyone there that day. It was quite impressive, and had, with the help of her partner Buck there, and sister-in-law Joanne here, who's making bannock. Laura and Mark contributed beef from their farm for the feast. And I'm just going to read some of her words here as I scroll through some of these photos. All who came to share in this ceremony participated wholeheartedly. The day fell into place as if it had been rehearsed for hours. It wasn't. The roles of everyone there were nicely tasked at the moment required, with satisfaction and great respect. Everyone was able to work together in a good, balanced way. Men, women, older ones, younger ones, everyone did something. I had no idea I would be blessed with so many hands that were so ready to work. It was a beautiful time, and everyone was meant to be there. This is Nina Wilson, who's also part of our advisory circle. And Mark and Laura, who hosted the feast at their farm and invited some of their neighbors in the area and relatives to be part of the ceremony and to learn about the network. And after the feast, we went out onto their prairie. They steward about 5,000 acres of native prairie. So it was an opportunity for people to get out on the land and see what's there. These are what the signs look like. Hopefully some of you might have seen them around. We're hoping that they become more and more commonplace. Yeah, so we spent the second part of the day out exploring the prairie with Mark and Laura and various other people as our guides. And I'm just going to finish with a picture of my kids here. This is part of their day-to-day life now, is touring around farms and ranches and being part of ceremony and learning about treaty. And I think that's the way that it should be. And I'll just say that it's really not overstating things to say that we couldn't have completed these things without the support of the Prairie Food System Vision Network. It's a very shoestring budget that we operate on, and almost all volunteer work. And although we've had decent success getting grant funding for printing and designing maps and that kind of thing, it's been very difficult for us to get operational funding for just the day-to-day work of moving these projects forward. It's always a struggle and very stressful. So this was really game-changing for us, and we're very grateful for that. And I'll just stop sharing here.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Val, for sharing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not very good at reading maps, but I love maps, and that printed map. And that, do you want to? I don't know. Maybe it's just me being geeky, but knowing that do you want to talk a little bit about the cartographer?
Actually, I do.
Yeah, I mean, he's amazing, an amazing resource.
Yeah, his name's Alex McPhee, and he works out of Valerie near Grasslands National Park, and he's an independent cartographer, an award-winning cartographer. You may not know that's a thing. I didn't necessarily know that's a thing, but he's created wall maps of Alberta and Saskatchewan that have gotten a lot of recognition, and he really does work to incorporate treaty territories and Métis settlements and all of that in these maps that are going up in classrooms and that sort of thing. So yeah, I was really thrilled. He gave us a deal because he supports what we're doing, and we were very grateful for that because he did really beautiful work. And yeah, it's functional, but it's also really pretty, I think.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
And we bring it around to presentations that we do. We were at the Indigenous Farm and Food Festival with that map as well, and we brought it back to Biche in the summer, and it's helpful to have as an outreach tool for us as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. There's quite a few questions in the chat now, so I'm just going to start going through them, and maybe we'll start with where we ended, sort of thing. So the first question is, do the treaty land access maps identify animal habitats, bird flyways, medicine areas, sweetgrass, rat root, etc.? No-go areas, entry and exit, road, paths, great feast?
Yeah, I guess it's a complicated answer. A lot of it in terms of the specifics of which species are there is dependent on the knowledge of the landholder, which varies significantly. So some of them are rangeland ecologists and botanists, and they have very comprehensive knowledge, although many of them use different names, right, for these species. So yeah, some locations have more information than others. We're hoping at some point, this is a suggestion from Larry Oakes on our Indigenous Advisory Circle, to get funding to do an inventory with elders of all of the locations in the network, but that would require a fair bit of resources. So that's kind of on our long-term wish list. Again, animal habitats, I mean, we'll say, for example, if it's native prairie or if it's cultivated land or tame pasture or that kind of thing. And the satellite imagery is hopefully helpful a bit as well. No-go pastures, yeah, will be mentioned. There typically aren't, or else they're just not included. They're not on the map if they're no-go areas. But there are things that change seasonally, for example, where cattle are, or we have Lumsden Beach Camp is part of the network, and they have kids camping in the summer, so hunting, is not permitted at that time, whereas when camp's done, then that's not an issue. So that's why we do ask for a phone call to notify people before you come, just to make sure that that's communicated. Yeah, and we do have the main access point is included in that new map. That's one of the updates that we made sure to have so that people know, that they're arriving in the right place. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thanks. I'll just do one more question for you, Valerie, and then I'll move to the other questions. The question is how the trend of land sharing willingness different in different treaties, and does it change over time? Like, how is it compared to when you first started and now? And then the reason for asking is she had a conversation with an elder in Treaty 7, and they said it was so much more challenging to hunt nowadays compared to when he was much younger. So
yeah, that's interesting. I've heard that a lot. And one of our coordinating committee members is actually doing his PhD research on this, on how land sharing has changed over time, because that's something we certainly hear a lot, is that farmers used to be a lot more open to this than they are now. And it's hard to know what is behind that. I will say that we've had a much harder time getting members in Alberta than in Saskatchewan, and there could be a number of reasons for that. It could be just the networks of the people that are involved there versus here. It could be just the higher population. There's a lot more hunting pressure there. Yeah, I don't know. And we're currently not in Treaty 7, so I can't speak to that. But yeah, it is, from what I understand, getting a lot harder. And it's often not something that landholders do impulsively. Lots of people, they'll reach out for information, they'll think on it for a while, months will go by, they'll have conversations with family. Like, often it takes quite a while, sometimes a year or two, for people to get on board. And we try to tell people just to try it and, give it a go for a year. And we don't ask that people sign up for life or anything. And we haven't had anyone change their mind or have a negative experience. It's all been overwhelmingly positive once people make that leap of faith. I guess it's just out of people's comfort zone. There's not a precedent for it. I mean, not to say that this hasn't happened informally for many years. It has, but yeah, like you say, it's less common now than I think it was certainly like 50 or 60 years ago.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for your presentation, Valerie.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Yeah. I have a question about wild game now for Norma. So the question is, does Wild Game Service include community hunts for big game, processing and distributing to on-reserve and off-reserve members?
When I was doing my research, there were a couple of projects that were doing that. One is with a series of schools, and they would pay a bit of an honorarium. The thing with wild game is it can't be a commercial enterprise, but they would involve community members to go out and hunt game that would be then served in the schools. That was done on reserve though, so the rules were a bit different. This because again, currently, provincially, wild game service is very, very restricted. So I think we would hope that eventually we could go towards that, but it's important to remember that there's two pieces of legislation. So the first piece is under the Wildlife Act and addresses what animals can be hunted and when and how they can be shared, right? So wild game cannot be sold, bartered, or traded. It can be gifted, but there's rules about that too. Under Supreme Court decisions, it's supposed to be shared with an immediate family, although usually policy has allowed for example, distribution to elders and other people within an Indigenous community. So and then there's the food safety aspect, which is what I deal with. And so that is, if wild game is being served, will people get sick, right? So I think that question would be more on the wildlife end for conservation officers and fish and wildlife officers to address. But I think that there is definitely some utility for that, especially, for example, for food banks or again, redistribution to people that might not be able to get out and hunt for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Norma. And then I have a question for you, Colleen. And are there any efforts to increase local food production in Lac La Biche that came from the Solution Hub?
Well, there's definitely the Lac La Biche Community Gardens. And then we started a program that if you grow a row to share. And so people were bringing in. And so then that created interest because then others realized what vegetables could be produced here. And then we realized that there was a bigger need, maybe not just for production, but for processing the food. So we got a tiny grant from Wolf Midstream. And so then we've been offering series where volunteers are doing like growing connections. And so what to do with the zucchinis, what to do with the spaghetti squash, that you make a mistake and plant spaghetti squash instead of cucumbers. And so we at rhubarb, Saskatoons, we've done sessions, pretty much every week. And it's kind of like a Walmart handout samples, not Walmart, Costco. But anyway, and then if people want to do more, we did one on pickling. And so we're likely going to do salsa next. So it's ongoing that, ways that you can use what is brought in.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. And then there's another question here about assisting either, I was going to say maybe for Marie and Colleen, in your projects, do you assist individuals and families to develop their own gardens or beekeeping ambitious and or chicken projects? I think we know the answer to the chicken projects in Lac La Biche, but
well, those would be wonderful projects, but
yeah.
You realize the regulations and the the cost of even, I don't know about beekeeping. We do have beekeepers that bring us donated honey here, but I don't know about the beekeeping end of it. But chicken, even for the slightest little hen house, everything costs so much. So, and even buying the hen costs you a little bit. So anyway, and then there's the problems of, chicken flu or that avian flu and biosecurity. Like you get into lots of, and feed and heat, like you get into lots of issues. So.
Fair. Yeah, no, thanks. And Maria, I'm not sure if with your gardening project, if you saw anyone sort of wanting to, grow once they've sort of got their hands in the dirt in your project, wanting to do it at home or helping them do that. If she's still
As I said in the chat, we give the learned skill and provide them through the process. They have a lot of interest, but after they leave our facility, I'm not sure if they've gone ahead. We do get some feedback on terms of they're doing really well in terms of their recovery, but I haven't heard other details. So
yeah,
yeah.
no. Yeah, no, that's great. Because I think it is, once you start to garden, but sometimes, access to land, and there's all kinds of reasons why it's hard to follow through. But I think it's interesting that, that there's interest.
Oh,
The people want to continue if they can.
Marla, I
Yeah.
just thought about that. I forgot. We volunteers build garden barrels here, or out of 45-gallon plastic drums and recycled lumber. And so that's provided folks in apartments, or, seniors that just want a little garden. And so with one of our families, they were a very large family, and that sparked that we ran out of garden barrels to give them. And so then we were giving them just soil in pails and whatever, and they grew all kinds of things. And so that sparked yeah, so that's another thing that's happened, that's been a spin-off of encouraging gardening.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And also just wanted to open up the floor, because that brings us to an end of the questions in the chat. But if you're more than welcome to come off mute and ask a question directly, or if you have some reflections or ideas for collaboration. Sometimes in the moment that's maybe something might not come to mind, but we definitely would, if you are interested in connecting with anyone who's presented or with each other, I'm very happy to facilitate that. But just wanted to give a moment just to see if there were other comments or questions, reflections. Oh, Audrey. Oh, and you're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, sorry for being late today. It's
No,
processing time, harvesting time, and seeding time. I follow the traditional method of winter seeding, fall seeding, so as well as in using indigenous methods of cultivation and food preserving. So I do dehydrating, and I have not really relied upon a store for 22 years now. I make my own squash flour, fruit roll-ups, dried meat, fish, the works, and it's been a food security avenue I will forever cherish and never go back to store-bought or and I live in the middle of a city. I live in the middle of Winnipeg, and I locally forage, as well as have helped many groups get going on their own things, such as Fireweed Food Hub was a local co-op of local producers, as well as Food Matters Manitoba, Direct Farm Manitoba, Godstory West Broadway, as well as our Good Food Club, which has been going now for 23 years. And I also do a land stewardship at Spirit Park, 200 Yonge Street in Winnipeg. So I do teachings there every Sunday from right now from noon till 1:30, and that will go even through into December, because we do also teach about harvesting medicinal plants as well as permaculture. So we just seeded, I think 2 weeks ago, some radish and spinach and lettuces. Those are already up. They'll be ready in a couple weeks. A week before that, we did bush beans. They'll be ready by the end of October. So utilizing some of those old methods has been vital for my ability to be food secure. On disability, we get $4 a day for food. And so this has been helpful. I don't belong to any organization. I'm an independent, but I do share my knowledge with schools and anyone who else who wants to know the things that I do. But I find that, canning and pickling, through our own studies, have shown you lose 60 to 80% of your nutrition by doing those methods, whereas dehydration, you only lose 14, because you're only losing moisture, not nutrition. And then rehydrating it, you can rehydrate it in whatever water or liquid that you want, such as medicinal teas and such like that, which is something I do. I make my own scalloped potatoes. I cook mine and then I dehydrate them, slice them first and dehydrate them, and then I can have my own, same as instant mashed potatoes. But it's not from a box, it's from my own produce. But dehydrating is so simple. It's basically a fan. You know, there's I have Dehydration Nations on Facebook, so I do share with others how freeze drying is very popular, but it's very expensive, extremely expensive. Many cannot afford the machine. They're $3,000 to $5,000, and that's just for one with only 5 to 10 trays that are very minimal. As well as you also need a tank, you need drainage. It's a lot more expensive, and whereas dehydration is a simple method that's been used for thousands of years by Indigenous people and has been proven to be not just be productive, but also easy to store. It can store up to 50 years as long as there's no moisture, and as well as portability, easy to ship. When you can ship, you know, if it's 5 pounds of something, you dehydrate it, it turns into 1 pound. So we have a PDF on our Facebook page and showing all those tables. And to run a dehydrator is, with my big one, it worked out with our Econo Guide, $1 for 24-hour run. Most things don't take more than 8 hours. So that means I can get 3 crops or 3 loads done in 24-hour period. So that's something I think really needs to be addressed, because the other methods, yeah, they may seem great, but the cost of jars, lids, salt, sugars, vinegars, processing, plus knowing how safe they are, because now we know a lot of vinegars are no longer the high amount that they need to be, beyond 5%. Now they're way lower. Same as the acidity in tomatoes even has decreased. So now they're not as safe to can. Whereas dehydrating, easily safe, and then you can rehydrate them in whatever way you want. I make them into a powder, and then I got instant soup whenever I want, or tomato sauce, or whichever, you know. But I think that's something that has not been tapped into enough, and I think really, hopefully, can be more adopted, because it's vital that we get food security back. I'd like to see a dehydration station in every nation, because
it's wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work that you do. And I'll definitely share the information that's on your Facebook page. I actually follow you, so it's really great to see you, not in person, but on the screen. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And we have Terry's put her hand up. So Terry, did you want to ask your question? Oh, and you're on mute, Terry.
Sorry.
So,
Thank you, Marla, Renee, Audrey, you're amazing. I learned so much. I don't really have much to contribute, but I just wanted to say, in nature's garden, the microbes stand first. And as a result, I found that greenhouses all have wood chips. Wood chips and the rows in between the planting. You don't have to water. You don't have to weed. And it's free. Every greenhouse has wood chips that it's cheaper than taking them to the garbage dump where you have to pay money. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Terry. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being on the call today. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Colleen.
All right. Well, is it it's kind of that going once, going twice? We're at 3:28 according to my computer clock, so that brings us to the end. The last thing that I wanted to say, again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the presenters. Thank you for your contributions and questions. I think, well, for me, it really, although not everybody spoke or had a question, we're all learning and connecting. And like I said earlier, if there's anybody that I can help facilitate a connection between after the call, just please do get in touch with me. Yeah, you can do that. You can go to our website, or I'm at community@prairiefoodSystemvision.org. And I'm going to be sending out a call. We're moving towards setting up a regional solutions hub, and I'd like to put together an advisory group. So I'm going to send out a call and see who would like to be involved in the very emergent process of trying to figure out how we put it together and come up with a plan for the 3 Prairie provinces on how we can mark in some way so that we can not create a plan that sits on a shelf, but create maybe some indicators of what progress looks like and how we can support organizations and individuals and First Nations who are working towards those points. So, helping to achieve food security and sovereignty for all treaty peoples on the prairie. So watch your email. I would really love for you to be involved. And I think that's it for me for now. So I'll bring the session to a close. Thank you again for being here. I appreciate you taking the time.
Will the recording be available for others? I know I missed the beginning, so I'd love to be able to see what I missed and see what I can
Yes.
tap into, as well as I'm more than willing to share